One of the biggest lies people with rare intelligence tell themselves is this: I must be bad at friendships. Because no matter how hard they try, casual friendships never seem to last. They can spend years surrounded by people and still feel strangely disconnected. What's confusing is that they usually like people. They're not cold, they're not antisocial, they're not trying to isolate themselves. Yet sooner or later, something happens. The conversations start feeling repetitive, the connection feels thin, and they slowly pull away. For a long time, many of them assume the problem is them. Maybe they're too picky, too serious, too intense, too difficult to connect with. But what if the real problem is something else? What if casual friendships are built around needs that your mind simply doesn't prioritize? Because people with rare intelligence often experience relationships differently. Most people use friendships to share activities, pass time, stay connected, feel included. Nothing wrong with that. But highly reflective people are often searching for something deeper: understanding, honesty, meaning, a conversation that goes beyond what happened today and explores why people are the way they are. And when that need isn't met, something interesting happens. The friendship may look healthy from the outside, but inside, they still feel alone. That's why many people with rare intelligence have fewer friends as they get older. Not because they stop caring about people, but because they stop finding fulfillment in connections that never move beyond the surface. And if you've spent years wondering why casual friendships feel so difficult, this video may explain something you've been trying to understand for a very long time. The first sign is often misunderstood by other people, and sometimes by you. You've probably been in conversations where everyone else seemed completely engaged. People were laughing, talking, sharing stories. Everything looked normal. Yet after a while, you felt tired. Not physically tired, mentally tired, emotionally tired. And that can be confusing, because it isn't that you dislike people. In fact, many people with rare intelligence genuinely enjoy learning about others. The problem is something else. It's the level of the conversation. Most casual friendships are built around shared activities, daily updates, entertainment, the same familiar topics repeated over and over again. For many people, that's enough. But for highly reflective minds, it often isn't. They naturally move toward deeper questions. Why do people behave the way they do? What shapes a person's character? What fears are people hiding behind their confidence? What gives life meaning? Those are the conversations that make them feel alive. The conversations that make hours feel like minutes. Without that depth, something starts to happen. They remain present. They smile. They participate. But internally, they feel disconnected. Almost like they're standing outside the conversation, looking in. And over time, that feeling creates distance. Not because they're arrogant, not because they think they're better than anyone else, but because the mind is hungry for something the conversation isn't providing. And just like the body struggles without nourishment, the mind struggles when it goes too long without depth. That's why casual friendships can sometimes feel surprisingly lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. The second sign is something that becomes more obvious as you get older. You stop being impressed by how many people someone knows, and start paying attention to how genuine they are. When you're younger, popularity can seem important. Being included, being accepted, being part of the group. Most people naturally want those things. But over time, many people with rare intelligence notice a shift. They become less interested in being liked by everyone. and more interested in being real with someone because they've learned something important. A friendship can look strong from the outside and still feel empty on the inside. You can talk every week, spend time together regularly, even laugh together, yet somehow never discuss anything that truly matters. Never talk about fears, struggles, dreams, doubts, the parts of life that reveal who a person really is. That's why people with rare intelligence often become very selective about who they let close. Not because they enjoy excluding people, not because they think they're special, but because superficial connection stops feeling satisfying. They'd rather have one honest conversation than 10 shallow ones, one real friendship than 20 casual acquaintances. And this creates a problem. The older they get, the smaller their social circle often becomes. From the outside, it can look like they're withdrawing from people. But that's not what's happening. They're not searching for more friends. They're searching for more truth. Because for them, authenticity creates connection. And without authenticity, even the busiest social life can feel surprisingly lonely. This is probably the hardest sign to explain to someone who has never felt it. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. You're sitting with friends. People are talking. Everyone is laughing. The conversation is flowing. Yet somewhere in the middle of it, a strange feeling appears. You feel alone. Not physically alone, emotionally alone. And according to me, that's one of the most confusing kinds of loneliness a person can experience. Because you're not missing people, you're missing connection. I remember having moments like this myself, sitting with a group of people I genuinely liked, listening, participating, smiling when everyone else smiled. But deep down, I felt disconnected, not because anyone did something wrong. The conversation simply never went anywhere meaningful. Nobody was talking about what they were truly afraid of, what they were struggling with, what they were trying to figure out in life. Everything stayed safe. Everything stayed on the surface. And after a while, I would go home feeling strangely empty. What I've noticed is that people with rare intelligence often don't measure friendship by how often they talk. They measure it by how deeply they connect. That's why one honest conversation can feel more satisfying than months of casual interaction. The difficult part is that most people don't understand this. They see you pulling away and assume you're becoming distant. But often, you're not moving away from people. You're moving toward the kind of connection you've been looking for all along. The kind where you don't have to hide parts of yourself just to fit into the conversation. The fourth sign took me a long time to understand. For years, I thought something was wrong with me. I had friends who were good people. They never betrayed me. We never had a major argument. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet somehow, I kept feeling myself drift away. And honestly, that made me feel guilty. Because how do you explain to someone that they've done nothing wrong, but the connection just doesn't feel the same anymore? According to me, this is one of the hardest parts of having a mind that constantly looks for depth. You don't just want friendship. You want growth. You want honesty. You want those conversations where both people slowly reveal who they really are. The problem is that not every friendship grows in that direction. Some friendships stay exactly where they started. The same stories, the same topics, the same version of each other, year after year. And after a while, something inside you starts feeling disconnected. I've experienced this more than once. Not because I stopped caring about the person. In many cases, I still cared deeply. But I realized I was staying connected to history more than connection. We were friends because we had been friends, not because we were still truly meeting each other where we were in life. That's a difficult realization, because loyalty tells you to stay, but authenticity tells you something has changed. And I think that's why people with rare intelligence often outgrow friendships. Not because they're cold, not because they're ungrateful, but because they're constantly growing internally. And when a relationship stops feeling real, they feel it immediately. Sometimes the hardest friendships to leave are the ones when nobody did anything wrong. They simply stopped growing in the same direction. This is where many people with rare intelligence start feeling different from everyone else. Because at some point, they stop chasing bigger social circles and start looking for deeper connections instead. When you're younger, having lots of friends can feel important. More invitations, more conversations, more people around you. But over time, something changes. You begin to realize that being surrounded by people and feeling connected are not the same thing. Personally, this was a lesson that took me a long time to understand. There were periods when I knew a lot of people. I could message someone almost any time. I wasn't isolated, yet I still felt like there were very few people I could truly talk to. Very few people I could be completely honest with. Very few people who understood the things I rarely said out loud. And that's when I realized I wasn't looking for more friendships. I was looking for deeper ones. People with rare intelligence often reach the same conclusion. They don't need constant interaction. They need meaningful interaction. They don't need to be understood by everyone. They just want to be understood by someone. That's why many of them eventually choose quality over quantity. One friendship built on honesty, trust, and mutual understanding feels more valuable than dozens of relationships that never move beyond surface-level conversation. If this sounds familiar, leave a 5 in the comments below. I'm curious how many people would choose one genuine friend over 100 casual ones. Because sometimes the loneliest feeling isn't having no friends. It's being surrounded by people who know your name but never really know you. This may be the most painful sign of all. Because it's one thing to feel misunderstood by strangers. It's another thing to feel misunderstood by people you love. People with rare intelligence often spend years trying to explain themselves. Not because they enjoy talking about themselves, because they want to feel seen, truly seen. But somehow, that doesn't happen very often. I think many people know this feeling. You explain what you're thinking. Someone hears the words, but they don't really understand what you meant. You talk about a concern. They call it overthinking. You talk about a feeling. They call it sensitivity. You talk about a deeper question. They tell you you're making life too complicated. And after enough experiences like that, something starts to change. You stop explaining, not because you have nothing to say, because you're tired. Tired of translating your thoughts into a version that other people can understand. Tired of feeling like every conversation loses something important along the way. Personally, I think this is why many highly reflective people become more private as they get older. Not colder, not less caring, just more careful about who they open up to. Because they've learned that being heard and being understood are not the same thing. And when you finally meet someone who understands what you're trying to say without needing a long explanation, the feeling is almost shocking. You relax. The walls come down. For the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you have to edit yourself. And maybe that's why casual friendships can feel so difficult. Not because you expect perfection, but because a part of you has been searching for genuine understanding for a very long time. And once you've experienced that kind of connection, it's hard to settle for anything less. This is the sign almost nobody talks about. And in many ways, it explains all the others. People often assume that those with rare intelligence want less connection, less socializing, less involvement with others. But from what I've seen, the opposite is usually true. They don't want less connection. They want a different kind of connection. A friendship that feels safe. A friendship where they don't have to constantly explain themselves. A friendship where silence isn't awkward. Where honesty doesn't scare people away. Where they can talk about the things they genuinely think about without feeling like they're too much. I think that's what many people have been searching for all along. Not popularity, not attention, not a large social circle. Just one person who truly gets it. One person who understands why certain conversations matter, why certain questions keep them awake at night, why they care so deeply about things that other people seem to move past so easily. And maybe that's why casual friendships can feel frustrating, because somewhere deep down, they're comparing every connection to something they've never fully found. A friendship that feels like home. The kind where you don't have to perform. You don't have to simplify yourself. You don't have to hide parts of who you are to make other people comfortable. Personally, I think that's why people with rare intelligence often have fewer friendships, but stronger ones. When they find someone they genuinely connect with, they invest deeply. They're loyal, present, honest. They care in a way that goes far beyond convenience. But until they find that connection, they often feel like they're standing on the outside looking in. Not because they don't belong, but because they're searching for a depth that isn't easy to find. And if you felt that loneliness before, there's something important you should know. The fact that you've struggled with casual friendships doesn't mean you're bad at relationships. It may simply mean you've been looking for something far more meaningful than most people realize exists. Final thoughts. Maybe you were never looking for more friends. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. Maybe you were never looking for more friends. Maybe you were looking for more depth. For years, you may have watched other people maintain large social circles and wondered why it seemed so effortless for them. Meanwhile, you kept drifting away from friendships that looked perfectly normal on the surface. And perhaps you blamed yourself for that. Maybe you thought you were too selective, too complicated, too hard to connect with. But what if the real reason is much simpler? What if your mind has always been searching for something many people rarely stop to think about? A connection that feels genuine, a conversation that goes beyond routine, a friendship where you can show up exactly as you are. No performance, no masks, no pretending to be interested in things that don't truly matter to you. Because at the end of the day, rare intelligence isn't just about how you think. It's about what you value. And people who value depth will almost always struggle in a world that rewards surface-level connection. So if this video resonated with you, leave a 7 inches the comments below. I'm curious how many people have spent years feeling disconnected only to realize they weren't looking for more people. They were looking for the right people. And before you go, here's something worth thinking about. Many people who struggle with casual friendships also struggle with something else. They often feel misunderstood, even by the people closest to them. Why does that happen? Why do some people spend their entire lives feeling like nobody truly sees them? That's exactly what we'll explore in the next video. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't finding friendship. It's finding someone who understands the person you've been hiding underneath it all. Until then, remember this. The people who struggle most with shallow connections are often the people capable of creating the deepest ones.